Hey guys, welcome to the first video of a two-part series which is going to bring us up to speed on our next topic, which is the Julio Claudians and Rome. Now, it's my understanding that you guys haven't done any Roman history in year 11. Apart from Pompeii, which is a bit of a static study, we're really looking at our historical period with fresh eyes, hence the need for a considerable amount of catch-up. However, hopefully you'll find these videos really fun and informative. So the purpose of these videos is to give you basically like a really basic understanding of Roman society and how it worked, and how we actually get to the point in Roman history that we're studying, which is possibly politically one of the most important periods. It's the very start of the Roman Empire, and it has profound effects on the rest of Roman history. Unfortunately, we're looking at the middle of Roman history. So I'll just get it up. Rome has a ridiculous, basically a ridiculous history. It's a massive civilization that it's a massive civilization that okay, so here we've got basically, it's not to scale, and I drew this. It's a rough kind of timeline of ancient Roman history. So basically, apparently, if you believe the historians, Rome as a city was founded on April 21st, 1753 BC, making it a Taurus. The city of Rome is a Taurus. Okay, for the first roughly 250 years of its life, Rome was actually ruled as a monarchy. Okay, this is probably the most murky and sketchy area of ancient Roman history. We have a lot of archaeological evidence for it, but the written evidence is quite lyrical and a novel at best. However, this period has a profound effect on the following periods, being the Republic and the Empire. The Republic is pretty much, it's seen as the height of Roman power. So during this period, Rome establishes itself as the ruling power in the area, first by conquering Carthage in North Africa, then the Italian peninsula, and all areas surrounding the Mediterranean Sea. By 27 BC, it becomes apparent that the governing structures, which we'll talk about in a minute, at the Republic aren't working anymore. Rome, the Roman Empire, has outgrown those. We enter a period of calamity, and then after that period, we end up with an empire. And that's basically where our look at ancient Rome starts. We start with that empire. And we look at how the government transitioned from being a democratic republic, sort of where people ruled through a body called the Senate, to a proper empire with an emperor at its head. Basically, what we need to do is we need to go back to the start, and we need to talk about the founding of Rome and the movement of Rome through the monarchical period, the period of the rule by kings, and through the Republic. We need to talk about basically how the Republic fell apart in order to understand the time that we're looking at. So what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm just going to get some cool pictures up to talk to you about this. And essentially, what I'm going to do is kind of tell you a bedtime story. It's a really weird one. Okay, so some of you might recognize this photo here. I'll just get it up. Oh, it's such a cute one. As a mother of two boys myself, look at that. It's a wolf breastfeeding two boys. Some of you may have seen this before and not understood it. Some of you might know the story behind it. But this here is Romulus and Remus, the two founders of Rome. Romulus is sort of the more important one, as he founded Rome. All Remus did was annoy Romulus and get himself killed. But here they are being suckled by a she-wolf. And this image is associated with ancient Rome. It wasn't created until after, but that idea of baby Romulus and Remus with wolves is something we see in Roman art, and it's an important part of the foundation myth. But we'll get back to that in a sec. And what we'll do is we'll start with Aeneas. Okay, so this picture here is actually a nice segue between the topic you've just done and it's a bit blurry, but that's cool. The topic you've just done and the one you're about to start. So this is actually a fresco from Pompeii, which shows Aeneas, who's the dude holding the spear, and he's having his leg patched up. Basically, the story of the founding of Rome starts with the fall of Troy. Aeneas is apparently one of the surviving princes of Troy. Priam gives him the sword of Troy and is told to take the survivors of the Greek invasion and go and found a new city. So basically, Aeneas hops in a boat with the survivors and off they sail, and they eventually land in the Italian peninsula. What's interesting, though, is Aeneas is apparently the product of a union, and hopefully I don't have to explain what a union is, between King Priam and the goddess Venus. So Aeneas happens to be one of those like particularly special humans with unique abilities. Anyway, so Aeneas sails around the Italian peninsula. He lands in Carthage, has a brief affair with Queen Dido of Carthage, who kills herself after Aeneas abandons her. He sails around a bit more, and then he lands in a place called Latium, which is very close to the site of Rome. There he gains the favour of King Latinus of the Latin tribe, who are one of the tribes that later sort of became the Romans. And he actually marries Latinus's daughter Lavinia. This causes a problem with a dude called Turnius, who was actually engaged to Lavinia in the first place. He and Aeneas fight a war. Turnius is overcome. And Aeneas is able to take his rightful place as king of the Latins alongside his queen when Latinus dies. Okay, so this establishes Aeneas as a king. If we fast forward a couple of hundred years, Aeneas's son Ascanius ends up becoming the king of a kingdom called Alba Longa, which the Romans derive their heritage from. This is really important. The historian Livy records probably the most comprehensive account of this myth, and it is really odd. But if we go down the line from Ascanius' sons and relatives, we have a line of Alba Longian kings. And everything goes pretty well, swimmingly, until we get to two brothers, Numitor and Aemilius. Aemilius, as the older brother, has the right to the throne of Alba Longa, but Numitor rises up, kills Aemilius, and takes the throne for himself. Basically, Numitor has usurped the throne, and this actually has ramifications for how Romans thought about themselves. Essentially, in this myth, there's a lot of bloodshed, deceit, and weird goings-on. So in a way, like, Romans were always really uneasy about how they ruled themselves and whether or not they were ruling properly and rightful exercise of power and all that sort of stuff. And you'll see that anxiety reflected in the sources that we're about to read. They're really complex people, Romans, which is why I love them so much. Anyway, so we've got Numitor, the younger son of this particular branch of Ascanius's tree, ruling. He's gotten rid of his older brother, so apparently you'd think, right, his claim to the throne would be unchallenged, but it wasn't. It wasn't at all. And we'll just get Romulus and Remus back up here because they're so cute. Okay. Numitor has one other threat to the throne, which is in the female form of his sister, Rhea Silvia. So Numitor, shortly after being crowned, takes Rhea Silvia and imprisons her in a cave near a river, just outside the city of Alba Longa. This actually Rhea Silvia becomes the first priestess in a very, very important Roman priestly college, but we'll talk about that later. It's really weird. Anyway, so rather than kill his sister, which he has scruples with. I guess he figured, he's already killed one sibling, he shouldn't do two. So anyway, he's got Rhea Silvia in a cave. However, lo and behold, Ares, the god of war, visits Rhea Silvia in the night. 9 months later, twins are born. Isn't that sweet? Okay, hopefully I don't have to explain how that works with you. These twins, male twins, are seen as a threat, so they're ripped away from Rhea Silvia, put in baskets and sent down the Tiber River. Fortunately for these two boys, Romulus and Remus, a friendly shepherd picks them up and raises them. And they turn out to be exceptional boys. They're really athletic, smart, witty, all that sort of stuff, charming. So it's only a matter of time before they find their birthright. And Livy records a really complex encounter where the boys, apparently sons of shepherds, stumble across Numitor, who recognises them. Yeah, I know, it's weird, you have to suspend belief. But anyway, Numitor recognises them. They kill Numitor, and in some versions of the myth, Emilius hasn't died. His nephews restore him. But for whatever reason, Romulus and Remus decide not to take the throne of Alba Longius themselves. They decide to strike it on their own and establish their own cities. Now, this is where sibling rivalry comes about. Romulus and Remus apparently set out to establish each of their own cities. Remus wanted to establish his city where he saw an unusual flock of birds, sort of like a religious portent or religious sign of where he wanted to establish his city. Whereas Romulus, on the other hand, I think established a city around Seven Hills, which is, of course, what Rome is known for. Apparently, though, if you go to Rome now, it's very flat. But anyway, apparently during the construction, Remus annoyed Romulus by jumping over the walls of his city, going, haha, what a crap city, blah, 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 as younger brothers tend to do. Romulus hits him in the head with a brick and kills him instantly. After burying his brother, I think the myth tells us that he just goes on with building Rome. That's pretty much it. Okay, so that's the myth of the founding of Rome. Essentially, the 7 kings, according to myth, that ruled Rome after Romulus were increasingly terrible. Basically, each king gets more and more tyrannical and despotic until the Romans are actually forced to get rid of him. This is really important, and I'm going to try to explain this to you before we run out of time. We've got 2 minutes left. Okay, so basically, right, during the monarchical period, Rome grew. People from all over wanted to come and live in this city, and it was particularly attractive to people who from lower classes of other neighbouring civilizations. So Rome ends up being this massive multicultural melting pot of all these different tribal groups. And during the monarchical period, they managed to kind of band together to form this city, which is really quite beautiful. But at the end of the monarchical period, the worst of all the kings, Tarquinius Superbus, is on the throne. And essentially, Romans actually rise up and get rid of their kings, and they vow never to be ruled by kings ever again. This has extremely important ramifications for the period that we're looking at. We'll just backtrack here a bit. When Romulus became king, he gathered up all of the people who had basically come to live in Rome, come to live in this new city. He said, as king, I need to have an advisory board. What I would like all the men to do is to raise their hand if they knew who their mother was. Apparently, in the crowd, there are 100 men who knew who their mothers were. These men became the Senate, so the ruling body of Rome. During the monarchical period, they were the king's main advisors. However, this group of men formed the aristocracy of the monarchical period, and they became known socially as patricians. So if we see here on this chart, patrician, they're basically the aristocracy. They're associated with the original senators, and essentially, like, Romulus gave them land, so they were farmers. They drew their, not actual, like, tractor-pulling farmers. Everyone else then became plebeians. They were all Roman citizens, but in the early